When we talk about witches today, especially online, we often imagine them as outsiders, marginal people that go against society. But that doesn't fit very well with the realities of the Balkan witch. Not in antiquity, not in the traditional culture, and not even today. So, who was and still is the Balkan witch in the village? First of all, we have to say that this was not a self chosen label, but rather a role. The difference between nowadays, especially online, and back in the day was that magic was something that you did, not something that you were, if that makes sense. So, being a witch in a certain community was not like a profession, but it was rather a role. A role of a person who is able to walk between the worlds and with their knowledge help the community in one way or another. Now, I hear people that have a bit more knowledge about the difference between the witch and the healer in the Balkans raise an eyebrow on this. But hear me out. Now, while the healer is a person who is sought after and is a valuable part of the community, and most of the healers don't hide even from scholars, journalists, or whomever, the witch is a different case. In Balkan traditions, magicians or witches are figures that are perceived as malevolent. Well, because most of the time they would do spells in secret in order to benefit their own self. But it is also the case when you have someone who is versed in magic in your own village, you would seek their help too. And there's the thing about the Balkan community, which is true even nowadays in a large extent, is that in a village, most of the people were either relatives or had very tight bonds. So everyone in the community would work to help the others in one way or another. And having a witch didn't mean having some extravagant lady living on the outskirts of the village. No. It meant that you had some person who is different in some way. For instance, this could be different in a good way, like immense beauty, or they could be different in what could be perceived as a bad way in the past, and I won't mention anything because I don't want to stir any feathers. Or you would have a person who is in some liminal space, like a widow, or some woman that no longer has the ability to have children, or something like that, or someone who is an offspring of a previous witch. So you have someone different, but they're part of the community. You have this witch, and he or she is your cousin or the brother of your wife, or so on or so on. My thought is that this is not a person that is separate from everyone else. This is a person that is embedded in the community. And if they're doing their work in the open, more or less, this is something the community knows about and doesn't punish. Witches are punished only when they do their job in secret. This person has some knowledge that's gathered in one way or another, and they do not call themselves witches most of the time, but are referred as such from their own community. Mind you, that witch is respected, but is also very deeply feared. And the reason for both of these things is their knowledge. The thing is that being able to wield magic means a couple of things. It means you can lift curses but also inflict them. It means you can heal people but also make them sick. It means you can call for rains but also chase them away. So I can go on forever, but I think you got the point. So this power is actually increased because this person lives within the community. They know you, they know your family. Most of the times, actually, we're speaking about elders, respected elders, who have knowledge not only about your current family, but maybe for some history of your family, or they know generations of your family. And this is more knowledge that adds to the respect and fear that was and still is felt towards the Balkan witch. So basically, a witch is not powerful because they have rejected society, but because they navigated and use their knowledge to benefit that said society. That's the light part. The dark part is the one that's punished. We won't go in there. Even when witches did do malevolent things that were not in the interest of said community, this was not going against the grain of society and rebelling against it, but rather taking what they thought was theirs for their own personal benefit. So their aim was not to destroy the society in a way, but to restore the balance as it was in their own eyes, of course. Sometimes the community itself would go to a witch and make him, for instance, something very common was taking illness and transferring it to a neighboring village. And now you can see that this is not a nice thing to do, to transfer your own sorrows and pains and suffering to somebody else. It's not considered good in any way, but interestingly enough, in the eyes of the community, that would be not something bad, but rather justice, or it would be something that helped the community, and it was justified. This is a better way to say it. Now, in this sense, it's very interesting that depending on the consequences, the witch or the person who had magical abilities was considered good or bad, even though the magic stayed the same. And this is precisely the case with the difference between witches and healers. Now, I hope that this gives you an example that there is no revolutionary rebel witch here in the Balkans who rides against the tides. But it has to be said that they were neither passive nor rebels, so they did manipulate the fabric of society in a way. But as we already mentioned, this was in order to restore the balance. And actually, you can see it in the example with transferring the illness to another village, because it was done to transfer the illness from a village that's suffering to a one that is not, which is not fair in the eyes of the first one. So it's again considered restoring of a balance. It is very interesting that depending on the consequences, as we said, the witch was punished or not. So, for the same things, basically, for practicing witchcraft, for doing spells, magic, and incantations, depending on the consequences, one could be persecuted and they could be rewarded, but only depending on the consequences for the community. So this is an interesting thing that's very specific here for the Balkan witches, and I think this can be said about pretty much most of the traditional views on witchcraft. And it has to be said that the predominant faith here is Orthodox Christianity, and we also have Islam, of course. But there is, due to historical peculiarities, there was no persecutions of witches here. So that might also have something to do with it. We have evidence that witches were discarded from society, so to speak, but those were rather rare cases, or they were rarely recorded. But anyway, nothing of the scale of what happened in other parts of the world, and especially in West Europe. The Balkan witch was not outside society looking in. She was inside it, and sometimes paid the price when social tensions rose. To understand her, we have to think not in terms of rebellion, but of relationship, a complex one, certainly, but also a strong and valuable one. In the village, the witch was a mirror, reflecting and responding to the needs, fears, and tensions in the community. Unnecessary evil, some might say, but just as often, undangerous necessity.